Hi Chris, how are you?
Good evening, Rod. I'm very well on a day that's seen multiple seasons. I've had thunderstorms, we've had rain, no wind, but lots of sunshine now, and it's probably the hottest day of the year, I think, for me in this country. I missed a few hot days the other week because I was away.
Yeah, that's my understanding, is we have officially hit the hottest day of the year. It started off really grey here and a little bit cold. I cycled to work in a t-shirt and I was getting wet as I was cycling in the rain. But then on the way back I was sweating.
Sometimes it's quite refreshing cycling in a little bit of rain. But yeah, less nice coming home, I guess.
But we've had our traditional weather report, so that's a good thing.
Well, I thought, why not kick off with a little bit of weather? I would have loved the weather if I wasn't working, because my shed gets rather toasty. But anyway, should we get into it? It's episode 133, and it's the 12th of August, and it's still 2024.
It is still 2024, and will be for another 4 months or so.
Oh, that's mad now you said that. Only 4 months. That's bonkers.
Let's not think about it. Let's do a little bit of follow-up. So last week we talked about a feature that Google was bringing for their GPT-style intelligence thing, which is called Gemini, that they're bringing to the next generation of Pixel, and it was a feature about adding you into pictures even if you weren't actually there, and I've just included the link to that for completeness sake.
I still don't like this feature. That's it. I just think it's wrong. You weren't there. Stop putting yourself in the picture where you weren't.
It is really wrong, and some news feed Twitter type thing will get hold of one of these altered photos at some point and claim that somebody was in it. For example, the Jeffrey Epstein photographs that various celebrities have been in over the years, and deny all knowledge. Stuff like that it's not going to be good.
No, agreed. No good will come of this. I think I will end with that.
I think that's a reasonable thought. Link in the show notes. Another thing that we failed to talk about last week that I meant to mention. Hang on.
Sorry, before we move on, it's the Pixel 9 event tomorrow, I believe. I was reading somewhere.
Ooh.
So, sorry, I just thought I should add that in as we just mentioned Pixel 9, because it's not out yet, but the event's tomorrow. So maybe next week we can report on what the Pixel 9 has brought and what the software's bringing. Yeah,
I think we can. I think this is the most leaked phone Google's ever had. Phones normally leak and all the features and all the software.
Don't they say that every year?
We know everything about the Pixel 9. It's crazy that they're the complete opposite of Apple in so many ways that we know everything about the Pixel 9, I think. But yeah, let's do a more sort of fulsome report on it. And as a Pixel 7 owner, I am vaguely interested in the Pixel 9, I got to say.
As a non-Pixel owner, I'm interested just to see what the competition's like.
Totally. It's good to, we've talked about before, Apple are at their best when they have good competition in the market. And I don't really feel the Samsung, to be fair, are bringing to them now, but good that they've got competition from multiple angles. An area they have no competition on, though, is adding DVD or Blu-ray discs to your Mac anymore, and the last DVD accessory is gone the way of the walrus.
I'm amazed this was A, still around, and B, it's no surprise, is it? They're going USB-C. This drive's obviously not going to make the leap from USB-A to C. They never supported Blu-ray, it was only ever DVD. So no big surprise. I do own one of these, I must say. I will probably hang on to it just in case one day I need a USB DVD drive. If ever you do anything retro, was all I was thinking. And it's sat up in the loft.
Wow, I never had one of these. I never used one of these. I think Apple did have a technology for a while where you could do a remote DVD into another Mac. I can't remember what that was called. But
remote disc, I think.
Remote disk and like that. So if you had a Mac with a drive and your other Mac didn't have a drive, you could access and install from the drive on the other Mac, which was really quite a cool piece of technology. I think I used that once just to see if it worked and then never thought about spinning disks ever again.
I think I bought this SuperDrive when I had the original MacBook Air I bought secondhand off somebody, and so I could reinstall OSs and stuff. Anyway, it's kaput. No big shock there.
No. I mean, you reinstall these days either with network volumes using PXE boot or using the Internet Software Restore on your Mac. I don't know if you've ever tried that. If you've ever tried to reinstall from the software, you need good internet to get going with that.
Yeah, I remember when it first came out, I was like, who's going to do this? Because I've said very poor internet. But now, to me, it's a no-brainer. Oh, yeah, I just internet restore it, and I'll wait 10 minutes, and it'll all be done.
Yeah, we've got faster internet these days. Or use a USB stick of some description, and you get it back on there. And that works for all manner of operating systems, even Windows.
Yeah, that is true. I think they've both got very good at it now, haven't they?
One thing that a version of Windows wouldn't have been able to do, though, look at me with my segues this week, is this amazing little bit of retro tech I found on Ars Tech. It's a $200-ish laptop with a 386 chip and 8 megs of RAM, and you can run, if you want, Windows 3.1 or Windows 95 on it, on like this little laptopy device. What do you think of this?
When you first sent this over, I looked and I was like, is this new? Is this an old bit of kit? I was so confused as to what I'm looking at. Why would you want to do this?
I really don't know.
Is this for all the airlines out there that are still running Windows 3.1 and what have you, in lieu of the CrowdStrike thing? Maybe there's a gap in the market for this kind of device that won't be impacted.
I suspect it's some Chinese manufacturer that thinks there's something that they can make out of this, and maybe it is for that reason. I gotta say, if this had been a thing back when I was running Windows 3.1 and Windows 95, I'd been all over this like a rash. I think it's a cool little device.
I'm with you. Definitely, I would have been on board with this, but it would not have cost $200 back then. It would cost way more. Obviously, it's got a lot more commoditized, doesn't it?
It would. I mean, potentially there's games or something, or bits of software like you've hinted at with airlines and things that really need that to run. I mean, the hardware on this, it's got GPIOs, it's got PS2s, it's got ISO ports and USB ports and parallel ports. Maybe somebody out there is still running some printer that they need a parallel port on, and this is the only way they can get it to print. I don't know.
Wow, yeah, maybe you're right. It's got to be a very small market. I wonder if there's some more of these and they have the Humane pin.
Yeah, have you seen the story about the Humane pin is coming back in faster than they can sell them?
Yeah, did we cover that? I can't remember if we covered that, but yes, I did see that story. Like their returns are higher than their sales, which probably isn't a shock, is it? Because you bought this pin, you can't do anything with it.
I mean, everybody said it was rubbish. People bought it, discovered it was rubbish, and not a way to found a business. And now both Apple and Google have done what they said they were going to do, and released their GPT models, or are getting to the point, Apple is, where they've released their GPT models. These things are going to be pointless instantly.
Yeah, it is. It is a shame. It would be nice to see something challenge Apple or Google to do something different, but that wasn't it.
Yeah. Another little bit of follow-up, we talked about it this last week, is Apple was saying security and fraud is a problem. It's why they don't open up their game stores and all the rest of it. But when you think about that logically, and Matt Birchler has picked this out very nicely on Mastodon, pointing out that every other game store runs by just putting a credit card in. The PlayStation, the Nintendo, Microsoft, Xbox, Steam, all you bang a credit card in, and they're not known for their massively fraudulent security issues. So, yeah, Apple's talking absolute pants here.
Oh, yeah, I completely agree. There's nothing more to add, is there?
There is no more to add.
We've had this for years.
But it was funny when you take a step back, because we all sort of nod our heads sagely when they go, oh, security, iOS security. This is the reason we do everything on the platform. And then you're like, hang on, this isn't even a problem. Why are we even talking about this?
Yeah, it's not a problem. Apple are trying to make it seem like a problem with some smoke and some mirrors, I think.
They are. Next story, we're rattling through the follow-up this week. CrowdStrike, our story of the week, 2 weeks ago and a little bit of last week, have been quite forthcoming about what caused their outage. Did you get a chance to look through this story?
I've had a brief look through it of saying that they were moving to a newer tech stack, basically, so they could do better updates, and this is what tripped them up. But it's interesting. I'm amazed they've come out with more detail, if you know what I mean. I was expecting them to remain a little bit guarded around it. Do you know what I mean? Because are they going to give away any secret source to what they do? Because up until very recently, CrowdStrike was one of the best rated, I'm going to say antivirus tools, but general Defender tools out in the market that wasn't the one provided by Microsoft and built into Windows. So I'm amazed that they've gone into as much detail, but I guess with all eyes on them, they possibly had to go above and beyond more than they normally would, because obviously they were so under the microscope.
Yeah, the sort of actual root cause for this, fascinating. And it's a real example of why you shouldn't just work with dev data, and you should actually roll this out to a couple of PCs first. Basically, the kernel protection space expected 21 pieces of data, and they only rolled the patch out with 20 pieces of data, which is what was in the real directory when it went to the real world. So when it was missing that one thing, kernel panic. And obviously when they were testing this, they just generated as part of their code 21 pieces of data in this directory, bang, 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 off you go. Put it on a real computer, there's only 20. Absolute epic fail for... Why wouldn't you test for that on a couple of your own PCs first before you rolled it out?
Yeah, because originally when this happened, I thought this was just, like a virus definitions update and something got corrupted. But it sounds like they're doing something new and they just hadn't thoroughly tested it. And like you said at that point, why aren't you rolling this out to different rings of people, groups, testing it on the whole company first before you go outside the company? Probably like Apple are doing with iOS. They're testing it internally, then they release it to some developers, then they open up the public beta, then they give it to the masses. Not a good look. And I'm surprised that CrowdStrike have admitted how basic a problem it was.
There is an argument amongst security professionals that you need to get these out and fast because they're actively being exploited. And if you leave it on some tester's PC or something, then the people who are fighting against you can get into it and sort of start to deconstruct your patches, so you need to issue quickly. However, there's issuing quickly, instantly everywhere, all at once, and then there's issuing quickly over the space of half an hour. Because I got to think, even the best security hackers in the world are going to need more than 30 minutes in order to do this. So I think you could manage it slightly more professionally while still rolling out. And you'd have known in the first 20 minutes whether this was causing problems of this scale. You don't need to just hit everything all at once, do you?
No, especially if you're not dropping an update for a 0-day vulnerability or something really malicious that's happening. If this is a change to a config that's something gearing you up for the future, this could have waited.
Could have waited. It could have been done more carefully. And where's the validation? I'm sure part of what we talked about last week is that they claim to be validating and doing checksums and doing all this kind of stuff on data that they're putting out and pushing to really quite at-risk PCs. That's why people put CrowdStrike on their PCs, because they think they're at risk of being hacked or state-sponsored people getting into their systems or whatever that may be. That's why people have it. So this just feels amateur all the way around to me.
Yeah, it does. And I'm struggling to find the link, but I did read somewhere that CrowdStrike are looking to purchase, to acquire a company known for testing and providing clever testing to obviously mitigate this risk in the future.
Yeah, and I can see you've also posted a second link that they've been awarded the Most Epic Fail Award at the DEF CON Hacking Conference. They
have, and fair play, they actually, received it in person, and the guy who received it, I'm trying to find his job title now, CrowdStrike president, they've received the Most Epic Fail Award, and he said, look, if you do this, you've got to own it, and we're trying to own our mistake, which I don't disagree with. If you make a mistake, you should own it. So I kind of think it's good they went and accepted the award. I don't know. They're trying to, you've caused the cock up, you've issued the fix. Now you've got to, fess up. They've publicly shown exactly what was wrong. They've now gone and got this award. So hats off to them, I think, on the aftermath. Not hats off on getting to the issue where we had all the issues on that Friday.
This is like Halle Berry going to pick up her Razzie Award for Catwoman, isn't it?
Yes, 100%.
I mean, I'm kind of with you. I think it's well done them for showing up and owning their problem, but it feels like such an amateur problem. I'm still sort of struggling. And the second part of the 9 to 5 article that we posted talks about how much they may be open to being sued, which we talked about last week as well. But it looks like they're not. They might actually get through this. I think CrowdStrike. This might not be a company-ending problem for them, but I certainly think I'd think twice if I'd bought CrowdStrike products in the past and was re-upping this year.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that might hurt them. Whilst they may be covered with legal copy to get them out of being taken to court, I think their obviously renewals have got a nosedive you'd expect.
Yeah, competitors are probably rubbing their hands together with glee.
Why wouldn't you be? Surely you're going to do it. If you're coming from CrowdStrike, you're going to incentivize people surely to jump ship. Now's your time.
Do you think Microsoft will make changes to the kernel and maybe push their own product a little harder now?
They already are pushing their Defender product massively in the corporate space. So I wouldn't be surprised. What they're going to do on the kernel, I don't know. That's a good question. And what they're allowed to do with the EU. And this is the problem, I think, when you have the EU and other governments mandating things, it can also provide a weakness. It's trying to get that balance right, isn't it? I think it needs to be done in the right way.
Yeah, but this is the problem, though. I mean, we're going to talk about Google and being a monopoly later on, but when you are a monopoly, what you do to maintain that monopoly is part of the problem. But anyway, we can talk about that later. Logitech is now walking back on what their CEO said just last week. They're saying the Forever mouse, the subscription $200 mouse that they were then going to pay a monthly fee for, was just an idea. This is an own goal of one of the most epic ways, really, Logitech, isn't it?
So I actually listened to the Decoder podcast. I quite enjoy it. the interview there, the CEO of Logitech, she's only been in post 7 months. She used to work at Procter and Gamble before that, selling things like Head and Shoulders and what have you, that shampoo products. It's a very different world for her. And I think she was just having an open conversation of things they're exploring and discussing and ideas. And that's certainly how it came across. And I think maybe the new, to generate some interest maybe in that podcast episode, they probably could have worded it better. They're doing a bit of clickbaity style things, and I think it went a bit far in that she was just airing it as an idea. She didn't say it was a product or something they were doing. She just said, it could be something we do. We've got to look at different ways to grow the company, and subscriptions obviously are what investors want. But I'm not surprised they've walked this back, because I get what you'd explore everything, but this is a silly idea.
It's an extremely silly idea. Do you want to tell us about Now TV?
Yeah, so I've put it in follow-up. But I noticed today when I got an email from Now TV, they're now basically saying if you've got the Ultra Boost, which I believe I have, you now get 4K content. And I thought this linked nicely with our conversation around the iPlayer when it only streamed in 1080p on the Apple TV. Now TV's been the same, and now it's gone up to 4K, which is great. That was it. So now I can watch F1 on my Apple TV in 4K.
How exciting.
I'm excited.
I'm glad that you are. Anything else in follow-up?
No, I don't believe so.
Shall we do a little bit of news?
Let's do it. So we're going to jump straight into Google being a monopoly.
So Google is actually being judged a monopoly. So a federal judge has ruled Google violated US antitrust law by maintaining monopoly in the search and advertising markets. It has violated Section 2 of the Sherman Act. The Sherman Act is an American piece of law. I think it was originally designed for railroad barons and things like that, when back in the early days of the West, when you could more or less own all access into and out of an area by maintaining the railroad. So they brought in the Sherman Act to say you couldn't have a monopoly and that kind of thing. It applied very much to AT&T, as was when they were broke up and split into the bells, I think the Americans call them, where they went all to all the regional things, which is why when the iPhone launched, it went to singular, because there was no AT&T network at that point, but they've managed to build up their network again to the point that they are just AT&T again. So when you're judged a monopoly, then you have a variety of sort of sanctions brought against you, as well as being, judged to be a monopoly, which I don't think anybody's surprised that this has been the case for Google.
No, is anybody surprised by this? Is this one of these things where we're looking at going, hasn't this already been agreed? Google's a monopoly, we've just all accepted it.
But this has consequences, and these are still to be seen. So the judge in the case has obviously made this ruling. In the lead up to this ruling, while she was deciding what judgment she was going to make on Google's monopoly power, was the disclosure that part of what Google does is, for example, give $20 billion a year to Apple to maintain Google as the default search engine on all Safari browsers on all platforms. As part of that, also Eddie Q was heard to say that they wouldn't put Microsoft offered. They wouldn't put Bing on any of their platforms, even if they offered them the company, which is, Eddie Hugh's got personality, hasn't he, to say stuff like that?
Yeah, he has got personality. I think they were saying, if Microsoft could give us the whole of Bing for nothing, and we still wouldn't use it as the default, which is obviously not fantastic. And there was rumours of Microsoft selling it to Apple at some point, and Apple looking into it. Yeah, I'm not surprised it's come out as being a monopoly, and then what does this mean for Apple? The whole 20 billion thing just feels wrong for Apple, a company that keeps banging its moral drum and how amazing it is and how good they are, and you should be trusting it with everything. It just feels like they need to get rid of that. They just need to, I know they need to, let it go and stem the flow with something else, because the shareholders will get upset. But surely that you need to wean yourself off it, don't you? So they should have been decreasing it maybe with Google over a period of time. Go, look, this is going to go in 2 years' time. We're going to wean ourselves off your 20 billion, and we're going to replace it with Apple TV revenue or Apple Music revenue or whatever it may be. But they could have done this and transitioned away from it without it being a big thing. And I think this is common for Apple, isn't it? They could have dealt with this themselves, or they could get forced into it, and they keep taking the forced into it solution.
I think let's come back to Apple. I just want to sort of finish the thought about Google a little bit, that ultimately what will this mean for them? Because acting like a monopoly means you're doing things to remain a monopoly. So, and you see this with Meta, you see this with Apple. So you aggressively buy other businesses that you think may compete with yours. You push your product everywhere it's likely to have an impact. So you do things like you pay Apple $20 billion because you see they're a big tech company. You pay Mozilla Firefox to make Google the default platform there as well. Probably not as much as they pay Apple. You do all these kinds of things to maintain your monopoly and you grow your market share. And that's one of the things the judge says, is that they've actually grown their market share from 80% in 2009 to 90% by 2020. So that is a lot of money Google's done. And they have, we talked about this last week, entered the vernacular. You don't really search for things on the internet. You Google it up, don't you?
But so, even I say you Google it, and I don't even use Google. But yet, like you say, because it's in the vernacular, if you read a book and they're going to go and search them on the internet, they always say, character A went and Googled it or whatever it may be. So you're right. And obviously by getting Safari and Firefox to set Google as the default, obviously Microsoft's the one against that, where they obviously set Bing as the default. But nearly everybody's got Edge. We just type www.google in before they go anywhere else.
And they'll install Chrome to do it.
And then they put Chrome on it and off they go. So, Google are definitely not covered in glory on this one. But it's too late. They've already got all the market.
They do, but this is it, isn't it? Now you've got a monopoly, and by paying Apple $20 billion, maybe they disincentivized Apple from building a competing search engine. And again, ATP raised a really good argument last week that once upon a time, Apple and Google fell out over Maps. Apple launched a Maps product to compete with Google, and it was a joke. It was absolute pants. We all laughed at how bad Apple Maps was when it launched. We don't laugh at it now, do we? Given it 10, 15 years, however long Apple Maps has been around, it got better. And you think if Apple hadn't had that $20 billion a year and they had it in it, let's face it, modern Apple probably would think about doing something like building their own search engine, because they could get revenue off that and advertising and all the things that they like too. If they hadn't been getting that sweet, we can do nothing, we don't have to do a thing, people would put Google in anyway. It doesn't really matter what else is in there. We'll just have the $20 billion, thank you very much.
I'm amazed they've never really done it, because you end up owning the user for longer. I'm amazed they've never done their own search engine.
Why would you when you're getting paid all this money for what people will set to default anyway?
Well, there is that.
Because I think it is slightly different from Maps, that it doesn't take very long for a user to search for something on the internet and not get the results they're expecting to go, right, I'm back to Google. Yeah. This is part of the knock against DuckDuckGo, actually, that it's good enough for me. Occasionally I do end up a default install of some sort and I'm back in Google, and Google search is really good. This is the thing though, it's actually a really good product.
As a surprise to no one, Google search, that's your right.
It's really good, and DuckDuckGo is fine. It's fine. It's good
enough. That's my view. In my view, I don't really use many Google products, but for me, DuckDuckGo is fine. I don't really know any different.
Occasionally, when I'm looking for particularly hard programming things, I do Google for things, and it will find information that DuckDuckGo doesn't. So, but for 99% of cases, DuckDuckGo is good enough, and Bing is probably good enough. But bizarrely, I would never search for anything in Bing ever.
Agreed. And
I used to try Ask Jeeves.
Microsoft should, like Apple should rename Siri, Microsoft should have renamed Bing at some point.
Do you think it'll rename Edge at some point?
I quite like the name Edge.
It's a terrible browser.
It was a good browser, I think, and it's got worse since Microsoft did it over time. Yeah. It was pretty good to begin with. It was good when it went to Chrome, the Chromium engine, and then I think after that they've just ruined it by making you sign in and give you prompts to turn it on and want to import your data. I've really gone off it. I thought it was pretty good up until that point.
You could say they enshittified it. So this is interesting, isn't it? When we see Google now named a monopoly, we've yet to see the impact this will have. Although Apple's probably, as you say, now looking at all their other revenue streams and thinking, okay, how can we fill this $20 billion hole? Maybe Google will pay them some other amount of money to or browser choice screen, but put Google at the top of it. I don't know what the repercussions of this will be for Apple particularly, but everybody
sure it's got to be search engine screen, and then I don't know, maybe Apple get a kickback from everybody for every search done with your search engine. I don't know.
I don't know either. I mean, it's just adding to Apple's monopoly in their market and their browser on their operating system, doesn't it? You realize what a dominant position Apple are in at that point, don't you?
Yeah, massively.
When you fire up Safari and you get Google, and DuckDuckGo, Bing, whoever, probably don't have the money to pay Apple what they think they deserve for having another browser engine at the top of that. I'm sure the EU would say, right, here's a list of search engines, randomize them, please, or something like that. So there isn't one specifically.
Yeah, that's what the answer should be. But it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
I slightly worry about Firefox, that it's a browser that's on its knees anyway. Taking away this kind of money could be detrimental to what I think is quite an important browser. It's one of the few browsers that actually takes competition to Chrome and the Chrome engine. Having said that, and again, I know the argument is Mozilla don't always act in the best possible way either. And maybe they've been lazy. Maybe they'd have found alternative revenue streams a little bit harder if they hadn't just been able to sit back and take the kickbacks from Google.
Agreed. I agreed on all of that. I would like to see Firefox persist in the space. You want choice.
You do. So I think that's about it to sum it up. Have we got anything else to add on Google being a monopoly, or we just watch this space?
I think it's watch this space now. We all knew it. It's now been declared, and it's now what is the ramifications of that.
Yeah. Another thing we're still seeing the ramifications of are Apple flailing around in the EU trying to find a pricing structure that it thinks will please the EU. So on the 8th of August, it announced a new App Store link-out use case, App Store structure, and I don't understand it at all. I've read this article twice now, and I genuinely don't understand how this pricing is brought to bear.
I'm kind of with you on this. I think I just don't know enough around it. But surely they've gone through this with the EU rather than post it out to the world and get feedback. Surely they've agreed with the EU what they're going to do?
I don't think they have. I think they keep trying things.
Yeah, that's what it feels like. It feels like a startup.
Yeah, and all of it is always for the benefit of Apple. I mean, every single time they release a new pricing fee, it just feels like this fee's being added to fees that we didn't understand. Steve Troughton-Smith is a little thing. Too long didn't read. If you link out to external payments in your app, Apple wants a series of fees for any digital good or service you sell to that customer, whether the transaction happens on the web, on Android, or anywhere else, for 12 months. 12 months after downloading the app.
Wow. That's a long time.
It's a long time.
And why should they get a fee if you're doing it then on Android?
This is the thing, though, isn't it? A lot of the stuff we talk about with Apple and the charging structure is, why should they get a fee? And we're going to talk about one we haven't had time to digest at the end of the show, at the end of the news section about Patreon. They genuinely think because something starts on an Apple platform that they own the money for that. Yeah. Chris is shaking his head in disbelief. And
I don't know what to say,
exactly.
to be honest. Yeah. You provide a general compute platform. Let people do general computing things on it. I don't know. We've gone from where the iPhone was when it launched and where it went for a few years, but it's now a general purpose compute platform. You can do everything from edit documents on it to send an email to browsing the web, and yet you want a snippet of everything that happens on it. That's not right.
I paid something like £1,200 for this device. I pay Apple £38 a month for the benefit of having a little bit more storage and a couple of services and things like that. They get quite a cut out of me now. Why do they deserve a cut? A never-ending cut for up to 12 months, actually, of somebody else's product that just happens to be on their platform. I can understand maybe the initial sort of purchase fee or something like that, if it's all through their store. But as you've just said, it's a general computing device. These apps bring as much value to the platform as Apple seem to think they have by having the platform. It's just mind-boggling.
Yeah, again, I don't know what you want me to say. I completely agree with you. It's just absolute bonkers, isn't it? I can't work out their logic on it and why they're trying to fight this when they already look in a bad space, and yet they're carrying on to do it.
The weirdest thing is, this is absolutely beginning to affect, certainly the people in our little pundit bubble, opinions of Apple. You get staunch Apple people who have been so for 20, 30, 35 years. Developers who now feel they're being treated increasingly badly. Customers who feel that Apple is acting in a strange way. In the main show, we're going to go into two more things that gives me extreme pause about the way they're behaving and what lies in the future for them. But all of this is going to affect regulators even more. They just need to look at what's just happened to Google, which is being judged a monopoly, and what they're going to be allowed to do. And that's just in the United States. This is going to happen in Europe as well. We see what the impact the DMA is having on Apple. Why are they being like this?
Yeah, I don't get it. I really don't get it. And it's month after month. There's another thing that just feels ridiculous. They're even bothering to fight. I don't get it at all with them. I don't know. I'll go back to that point. I think, is it time for a change of leadership?
Well, maybe. It's hard to turn a ship that size, though. They're going to be sued. It's going to be death by 1,000 cuts, I think, unfortunately for Apple. That they're going to get sued in every territory in the world. They'll have all sorts of regulatory things they're going to have to deal with in order to manage it, rather than just getting ahead of it and going, right, it's like this. We'll only take 2% here. We'll do this there. And they'll be very sort of sensible going forward. But no, death by 1,000 cuts. Did you watch, this is a brief tangent but might make sense. Did you watch The Three Body Problem on Netflix?
Nope.
There's a sequence on that where it's sort of fairly pivotal to the whole show, where they slice a cargo ship up using some nanowires. And this is now my allegory for Apple. I might, if you remind me, I'll try and find a link to it on YouTube for those that aren't going to watch it, because it's kind of a spoiler. But this is the way I feel Apple's going, is they're determinedly driving into the sort of the slicing machine.
Yeah, 100%. 100% they are leading themselves down this in slow motion, just like you say, death by 1,000 cuts.
Another thing we've discovered is that there's the AI prompts behind macOS Beta, the current version of the Apple Intelligence stuff that's in there for mail and messages and stuff like that. And I find this quite interesting. We're going to go from having Google Foo, there's another thing that's entered the vernacular, where you can engineer a Google search in such a way that it finds exactly what you want it to do, to becoming prompt engineer. So when you're asking your chat GPTs and your LLMs, you need to be super specific about what you need to say in order to generate those queries. Anyway, I'm not going to read it all out, but the one for Apple Mail has bubbled to the top from somewhere, and it starts with, "You are a helpful mail assistant, which can help identify relevant snippets from a given mail and short reply snippet." So all of the clever intelligence is just some quite good prompt engineering.
Yeah, this is interesting, I think. And I have heard about people being good prompt engineers before. It's probably like when we first used Google 20 odd years ago, we got good at Google because we used probably less words. And that was the whole trick of getting good search results. Whereas the trick to get good large language model results is to be really verbose and really detailed and put more words in. And I guess in this scenario, it makes sense because you're going to reuse this all the time. Whereas often when you're searching, you're just doing a quick search because you want something. Whereas actually the trick with AI is be really verbose. Go, really explain what you want, and then it will use all of that and give it back. So it's quite interesting though that these aren't, I don't know what, encrypted somehow rather than being there in plain text to go and get. It's just interesting that people have gone and found them in macOS, and you can see exactly how they're doing it. It's quite interesting.
It is. I quite like the do not hallucinate as well.
Well, I guess you need to tell it that as a just in case.
How does it know if it's hallucinating?
Because it's self-aware. That's a Terminator 2 reference.
Yeah, it becomes self-aware. I think we're past the date for that, though, aren't we?
Yeah, that happened quite a few years ago, I think.
Yeah, we're safe from it so far.
You're thinking of Judgment Day.
I'm thinking of Judgment Day. Moving on, a security fix, or at least a projected security fix, that Sequoia is going to fix an exploit that's existed for something like 15 years. Did you catch this story?
Sorry, I was busy looking up Judgment Day to work out when it was. I didn't find it. No, I did not see this. I'll be honest, because I don't use my Mac a huge amount. I don't keep up with all the news. I possibly should, because I should use my Mac more.
I read all these stories on my phone, Chris, and I save them,
Yeah, no, you're very good. But I did see something with the 4 zeros pass me by, which is what this exploit's linked to, isn't it?
Yeah, so this is localhost, basically. If you're a Unix-based machine, and so this affects Linux machines as well. Attackers can get access using a web browser, Safari, Chrome, Firefox, etc., to handle queries to the 0.0.0.0 IP address. Windows fixed this a little while back, I think, but there's still Apple, and like I say, this code has been known at least a decade, I think. I'll be specific. It's been around for 18 years, and Apple hasn't fixed it, and neither have some of the Linux vendors either, so it's not just Apple, but this is a very bad look.
So does that mean it's in the too hard to deal with pile? Like, if it's been around for that long, that feels, I don't know, exceptionally long time, do you not think?
Possibly, but they've known about it. It's been there 18 years. It's obviously an active thing that can probably be sort of slightly mitigated by firewalls and all this kind of stuff that protects your computer from the internet. But they're going to fix it now in Sequoia. I mean, well done. Finally got around to it. Eh?
That's a finally, isn't it?
Yeah. Developer code and internal messaging are good examples of info that can be accessed right away if you know how to exploit this attack.
But interesting though, if it's been there for 18 years, has it ever really been exploited?
Yeah. Well, I suspect it probably has, but it'll be the kind of exploit that will come up at the DEF CON conference, for example, that we were just talking about, that CrowdStrike collected the reward from, is if you know about this attack, you can always use that once you've got a particular level of access to a machine. And I think the way these hackathons or conferences are engineered is like they'll make super secure systems and they'll drop the security on them, and people will have a new exploit, they'll come and test on them, and that's how they'll win the rewards. And then the company will give money for the patches and things that come along as a consequence of them. But this sounds like something that should have been fixed a long time ago.
Yeah, especially because obviously a lot of attacks are various daisy chains of different vulnerabilities. 100% this should have been resolved.
Definitely. Have you seen Elon's latest wheeze?
Oh, Elon, what's going on in your mind? It feels like Elon's a bit like Apple in a way, just a little deluded over here in the corner, thinking that people owe him. I don't know what you think about this.
I'm just amused by this whole thing. So the root of this story is that Elon Musk and Twitter plan to sue a group of companies for not advertising on Twitter. The group of companies that have actually disbanded the sort of industry body that they were since decided not to advertise on Twitter because their products were being placed alongside things like far right-wing tweets or homophobia, transphobia, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, hate speech, and next to that would be buy X product next to that. So they felt bad about that, so they stopped doing it. If we remember correctly, Elon's response to this was, "Go F yourselves, we don't need you anyway." And now he's
Turns out they did.
Now he's crying and he wants them to come back, and he's suing them over their illegal boycott. I just think this is the most amazingly deluded take on anything.
Yeah, it is bonkers, isn't it? But if you're a brand, let's take Nike, Adidas, whatever, you don't want your product being advertised next to hate speech. It's just not right, is it? Because it's going to get screen grabbed, there'll be memes about it. It's awful, isn't it? And then surely, if it's your revenue dollars that you're going to pay, your marketing dollars, that you're going to pay somebody to advertise, on their platform like Google or what have you, surely you get to pick where you spend those dollars. I don't see how you can sue a company for not advertising and spending dollars with you. I find it's a very bizarre one to take somebody to, I was going to say to court, but to sue them over. I don't know how you prove this.
He told them to go away. They were just following his instruction. And see, these are some big companies. You've got Unilever PLC, Unilever United States, Mars Incorporated, CVS, which is a pharmacy chain in America, Orsted, all members of this GARM institution. And this, if you recall, was about the time you and I both left Twitter as well, because of the toxic hell stew that Twitter was becoming. And it's interesting, we see in the UK that the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has asked Elon Musk to be very careful what he's saying on his platform and giving people a voice that they may not otherwise have had, or saying some of those things or retweeting some of those viewpoints himself. And it's funny, just as we've been talking, my Apple Watch has gone off with a link from The Guardian saying Labour MPs begin quitting X and growing alarm over Musk. So you go from annoying advertisers and claiming them and suing them for their illegal boycott to now upsetting the politicians in a country that are currently in power and can probably do something about the reach your platform has within that country to a certain extent.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's the whole thing, though, is, I don't know, it does make you wonder what is going on in Elon's mind. And I'm assuming he's the one driving this and not other people at Twitter. It feels like a very Elon thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, Linda Yaccarino, who's the person who had a press conference about this, or certainly released a video about it, is very much a mouthpiece for Elon as far as we can see, and that seemed to be the case right from the start.
Yeah. It's just, it's bonkers. She's just his puppet, really, isn't she, fronting the business, because he's not allowed to be CEO, but he is CEO, really.
Oh, he totally is. There's a nice little cartoon then by Kevin Beaumont, who did a lot of stuff around the CrowdStrike. He's a security researcher who used to work for Microsoft, which I quite enjoy. So I'll leave the link in the show notes for anybody who's interested, but it sort of summarizes it quite well in 4 panels. His Mastodon account is Gossy the Dog, and I recommend you follow him.
He's quite good. The cartoon is very good.
It is very good. And last story, and as I say, we haven't really had a chance to properly read or digest this yet, but just as we're about to go to show, Apple or at least a bunch of creators on Mastodon and a few websites. And Patreon themselves have stated that Apple's requirements are about to hit creators and fans on Patreon. Here's what you need to know. Apple is requiring Patreon to switch their iOS in-app purchase system starting this November or risk being removed from the App Store. So Patreon is a way of supporting creators directly rather than through advertising or through links or something like that. You can pay creators $1 a month, $15 a month. There's sort of various plans for it. You see lots of YouTubers do it. And it seems that Apple, up till this point, has not been charging any transaction fees for that. Because you're directly supporting a creator to do a thing, you're not supporting a product in and of itself. And they've changed the rules. And it looks like there's certainly a bit of a storm brewing about it.
Yeah, I mean, fair play to Patreon. It's a great way of getting some press attention on this. But the whole idea of Patreon is you're giving money more or less directly to the creator that you're supporting. You know, whether it's, I don't know, a niche website on steam engines or cooking or whatever you're into, you're giving as much money as possible directly to them rather than it going in fees and various other things. And now Apple want to take 30% of it, which is just insane, isn't it? And so they're looking at ways to do this, and they're suggesting that they would have an option when you're choosing how you're backing them is, will you pay 30% extra so that the creator still gets the same amount of money and Apple's fees then get taken care of, or you can pay the same amount of money you've always paid, but Apple obviously will take a chunk of that and the creator will get less. But it's just Apple, stop being Apple. I just don't get it. I really don't. You're nickel and diming everybody. It's such a bad look.
Yeah, 30% App Store fees will be charged to all new memberships purchased in the Patreon iOS app. And as we've learned, Apple don't like you linking elsewhere for that money to go elsewhere outside of their platform.
Yeah, so you're literally a captive audience. Do you think a year from now Apple are going to start suing people for not using their devices and services anymore? Because they basically told us to go F ourselves, to use Elon's parlance.
You switch to Android, we're suing you for not buying an Android phone. Honestly, current Apple, it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, it's just, the whole thing is just bonkers, isn't it?
It really is. It's very upsetting.
But how much time and effort is Apple wasting on all of this stuff? Why don't you put that time and effort into innovating and doing what you do best?
Yeah. We said this last week before. The hardware is as amazing as it's ever been. It's better than it's ever been.
100%.
But all the death by 1,000 cut stuff in the software and the payment systems and everything else it's becoming a massive problem for me, I got to say.
Yeah, they're just... Some of the software is good, but some of the decisions they're making on policy, corporate policy and decisions of how they want to interact with the world is bad. And it's tainting everything else.
It is. Should we do some media?
Yeah, let's do some media.
One for you, really. I've watched all of Clarkson's Farm Series 1.
You've only just watched Series 1?
Yep, it's taken me that long.
Okay. When I just read this now and I thought, surely there's a typo there. It should say Series 3. Okay, Series 1. And what did you think of Clarkson's Farm Series 1?
I thoroughly enjoyed it.
It is a good piece of entertainment, I would say.
It's an extremely good piece of entertainment. I think it shows how hard farming is. I think it's a really good way of bringing that spotlight. It's obviously slightly artificial in the sense that he's got all the money that Amazon have given him, and all those other bits and pieces that he's earned over the years to do that. And
he's got all the money.
He's got all of the money. He's got some of the money Apple doesn't have. And that's probably no spoilers. Most people will have seen it. But at the end of the first season, he makes £144. That's it. No more zeros in the end in profit at the end of for all the work and everything that he's put in, which obviously a normal farmer wouldn't be able to live on. But then a normal farmer wouldn't have had all the crazy ideas that Jeremy had over the course of doing that. So this is fine. But it really does shine a good spotlight on that. I think he has managed to walk himself back from the precipice of his environmental doom and cataclysm that a lot of people blame him for with the internal combustion engine and his attitudes to things. He comes out of it looking a lot better. I mean, he's still a gorilla in the words of the other Top Gear presenters, but I think it's quite a good way. It's a good way of shining a light on the state of farming in Britain and how hard it is for people. Yeah.
So look, I'm usually mixed on Jeremy. I like some of his stuff. I've watched him for a number of years. Generally I like the content that he produces. I think he's an interesting guy, but he does come up with some harebrained ideas, and it does make good entertainment. It does work, and he's taken the Top Gear, the Top Gear formula, and applied it to farming basically, and it's worked really well. Some amazing cinematography, I thought, on TV show. A lot of it drone footage and things. It just looks really cool. But I think he's done a great job. I've enjoyed the other 2 seasons. The farm's not a million miles from me. And he just bought a pub around the corner from us. So it's going to be interesting to see how we're going to have Clarkson's pub coming up, and we'll have Clarkson's farm and, various other things. But if ever you go to the farm, it is absolutely rammed. Every time we've been a couple of times. And people come from a long way away to just come and see it. And there ain't a lot there to see. It's just a very small shop, as you've seen in Series 1. But no, I think it's a good bit of entertainment. I just wish they did a bleeped version so I could watch it with the family a bit easier. But the kids watched it and enjoyed it.
They're going to hear stuff at school. There's no getting away from the words that are used.
No, agreed. But surely with all the AI smarts, we could have any show bleep these days, like they did with Taskmaster. Why can't we just have that as an option?
Thankfully, there was no swearing when I was growing up, and I don't know the meaning of any of these words. I would say it doesn't redeem some of Clarkson's more extreme personality traits. He's still as boorish as he's ever been, so I'm not apologising for the man. I'm just saying I think he's doing a decent job of highlighting a sector that probably needs more help than it gets.
Yeah, I completely agree. Wait till you see some of the later ones.
Yeah, and it is good entertainment. Also good entertainment, Celebrity Race Across the World Season 2 premieres on Wednesday night in the United Kingdom.
Come on, I'm looking forward to that. I love that show. So yeah, that's another one I like to watch with the children. So yeah, I can't wait.
And you've got your Ted Lasso characters in there as well. Isaac from Ted Lasso is going to be in it.
Yes, do you know what? I did see that pass me by, and I was like, oh, awesome. So I'm looking forward to that because there's not many of them I know. So I'm looking forward to
Scott Mills, Kelly Brook, come on.
I've heard of them, but I don't really know much about them, I must be honest.
Wow. Anyway, I'm really looking forward. It almost doesn't matter who's in it, frankly, because the celebrity one is exactly the same as the normal everyday people one. So they're in the same situation. I don't think they have any more minders or anything just because they're celebrities and they're just expected to get on with it the same as everybody else does. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, can't wait. Well, looking forward to that.
I have been rewatching, or I vaguely started rewatching Red Dwarf as well. So I didn't realize it was all on the iPlayer, or at least a lot of it is on the iPlayer. A lot of the bits you'd want to watch maybe are on the iPlayer. So I am now on season 3, episode 3 is the next one I've got to watch. Crichton is back in the show. They've had the redesign where Rimmer wore the sort of glossy green uniforms and everything. That is a show that is genuinely as funny today as it was when I watched it back in end of the 80s, I think. 88, 89, I think Red Dwarf dropped. Yeah,
I'm watching in the 90s. I loved it. So I should go back and watch it again. Actually, it's been a while, but fantastic. And some of your enjoyment, though, is probably remembering it from your youth and how much you enjoyed it back then. I know I certainly have moments of that.
Yeah, I'm going to have to look up the actual air date of when it was, but I do remember it coming on, 15th of February 1988 is when it aired in the United Kingdom. And I watched it on BBC Two when it came along with my mate from school. And I was like, this is almost everything I want in a show. It's funny, it's edgy, it's science fiction, and it was proper sort of Odd Couple in space. Certainly those first couple of seasons with Rimmer and Lister's relationship. Really well done. On a shoestring.
On a shoestring. And it is cool. One of my favourite ones, I can't remember which is from a later series, where they go back in time to JFK getting assassinated, and they go, oh, we could go on that grassy knoll over there and drive the conspiracy theories nuts, and it's just fantastic, and they teleport into the book depository and stuff. So it is fantastic, really well done.
Good show. What is The Instigators, Chris?
The Instigators is the latest film on Apple TV Plus, and it stars Matt Damon and Casey Affleck. And
Casey Affleck or Ben Affleck?
Casey. I think Ben may have produced it. I thought it was going to be really good. The trailer looked okay, and I'm super disappointed with it because it's just a bit slow. I don't know, it just feels a bit wooden. I'm really disappointed because I'm quite a big Matt Damon fan, quite like Casey Affleck. I thought it was going to be really good, and I'm just, I've only just finished watching it before we recorded, and I was just a bit, I wanted it. When you want something to be good, and I thought I'd try it. Surely all these reviews can't be right. It's not that bad. It's just a bit slow, just a bit. There's a couple of funny lines in it. Some good car chase. But I'm just a bit disappointed.
Sorry about that. I watched the trailer. I thought, I don't like the look of this. It doesn't look very good.
It's not very good.
Apple TV Plus does not have a good reputation on films, does it?
No, they've not cracked the film market, which is a shame because I like films. I like films more than TV shows. Because I do think sometimes people drag something out for a TV show, whereas you could do it in a 2-hour film. And this 2-hour film was far too long for the content of it, in my view, sadly.
Well, Coda was good. Killers of the Flower Moon was not. Greyhound was all right.
It's all right.
Yeah. And that's the best you can say about a lot of the Apple films. Is all right. You didn't enjoy Lucky at all, I seem to recall.
I think I watched all of it. I think I watched a bit of it.
Yeah.
But no, disappointed with the Instigators. I did watch all of the Instigators and should have just watched something else that I know I'd enjoy. Maybe I should watch some Red Dwarf. I could have probably fitted about 4 or 5 episodes in.
I think that would have been a far more profitable use of your time. Should we do some games?
Yeah, go on then.
I got one. I haven't played as much of it as I want to, but I'm intrigued by it. It was on sale on Steam last week. It's called Viewfinder. It's like a more gentle Portal, really. So I've linked the Steam store page of the thing. You can pick up photographs as you sort of move around this world, and then you can use the photographs to sort of solve puzzles within it. It's really quite a clever concept, and a bit mind-bending in places as well. Very gentle, no sort of depth instruction. It's just puzzles that you're trying to figure out what goes where. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. It is Windows, but I think it will run with the Mac porting toolkit. But yeah, it works on Linux, that's for sure, because that's the only way I play games these days, and that in my PlayStation. But yeah, nice little game. If you get the chance, check it out.
It is compatible with the Steam Deck.
There you go. It's perfect for a Steam Deck as well.
Yeah, it does look. It does look quite. I quite like the art style, like you said. I think it's. Yeah, I can't think where I've seen that kind of art style before, but I like it. It looks cool.
It's quite whimsical, and the sort of puzzle element to it of you pick up a portable camera, you can turn that into the part of the scenery, you might need to charge up a thing in order for something to happen, so you've got to find batteries. You know, this is a portal, I'm going to photocopy this picture so I can make steps and all that kind of stuff that you do within it. It's really quite a novel idea, and obviously influenced by Portal, because what isn't? But it was nice, and I think I picked it up for 12 quid or something like that. Even at full price, it's only 20, but Viewfinder, very good.
Wow, I'll put that on the watch list.
Yeah. Anything in games?
We can talk about Gran Turismo, but you probably bored of me saying that now. So no, look, I genuinely have not played anything lately. I did catch my son playing Descenders recently, and Descenders is a mountain biking game on the PlayStation and on the Xbox. It's probably on other consoles, and he doesn't play it all the time, but he does keep going back to it, which is quite nice to see. And it reminds me when I used to play SSX Tricky on the PlayStation. You know, you're going downhill, you have to do some tricks, you get points. So I'm interested to see that appear instead of Fortnite for a change.
I have a recommendation for you on your PlayStation. If you can find Trials.
Okay.
It's a stupid little motocross sort of game where the idea is you've got like 30 seconds to clear a course in as short a space of time as possible. You can play it, turn about with controllers. It's really good fun.
Okay, then that will also go on the list.
Look at me adding to your list. Should we do a main show?
Let's do it.
Let's do a main show. It's going to be slightly depressing, I think. Sorry, as many of them have been recently. We need some positive stories about Apple, please, not all the negative ones we get at the moment. But this is something that I feel it's hopefully going to be a storm in a teacup, but it's definitely worth covering. So over the last week, 2 things have become apparent are going to be in the next version of Sequoia. So the 18.0 betas of Sequoia, the current version, is on there. I'm not running it on my Mac, so I can't speak to this personally.
15.
That's me getting my iOS and my Mac OS mixed up.
Yeah, I do all the time. It's so frustrating.
Mac OS 15 beta has 2 changes in it, which I think are big problems. One is a bigger problem than the other, but the other is indicative of the way things are going. So the first one is Sequoia has added a permission prompt, a weekly permission prompt for screenshot and screen recording apps. So that doesn't sound like that big a deal, Rod. What are you on about? They're protecting our security, aren't they? I want to know if that dodgy game I installed last week is actually capturing my screen all the time in the background. That's something I should know. When I was rushing through to get the game installed, I didn't care. I just clicked allow 15 times and off I was, and I didn't know 10 years later it's still running in the background. Protect us from this evil. Yeah? I mean, that's the way Apple would sell something like this.
100% that's how they should sell it, and I get their motivations for doing it. I think they are just missing the one bit where you tick a box and go, I completely understand, I'm fine with it. Tick, don't show me this again.
Yeah, and had that been there, this would not be the, hopefully, like I say, storm in a teacup that it is. But if you think of the repercussions if they left this in, I use an alternative screen capture app. So that's going to bother me every single time I restart, and once a week, no matter what.
It's very hostile to developers, isn't it?
Very. I share my meetings on Zoom and Teams. It's going to bug me for that every single time. Every single time that you relaunch or once a week, Zoom and Teams are going to be flagged as potentially recording your screen all the time. That's a problem for lots of people.
That's just, I hadn't thought about Teams and other video conferencing apps. That's just bonkers, isn't it?
All those sort of accessibility, third-party, screen readers, all those kinds of apps are going to prompt you once a week or every time you reboot for all this. This is the most user-hostile piece of nonsense that I think I've ever seen. And it's what you said a minute ago. It's even the model on the iPhone is better than this, where it goes, this is doing this, are you okay? And they'll come up the next week and go, still doing this, are you still okay with it? Always allow, leave me alone. Right? And then maybe in 6 months it'll do it again. That would be okay. This is bad, this is wrong.
It's too far. It's too far in the wrong way, isn't it? Why did they even think about it? I just can't believe they didn't even workshop this out. Maybe somebody did and they got shouted down, but it's awful, isn't it?
I presume it will affect things like Audio Hijack Pro, because it's going to do audio recording as well as screen recording. So it's going to affect a whole sequence of apps. The unintended consequences of this could be huge.
Yeah, that is the thing. It's the unintended consequences, or just not not thinking out. It'll be interesting. New betas are coming out today, I think, whilst we've been recording. So it'll be interesting to see if they've walked it back at all. I haven't seen anything yet, but it'll be interesting to go, are they listening to the room or are they just ploughing on needlessly?
I hope that next week we've got one liner that goes, yeah, all that stuff Rod got very upset about and Chris is annoyed about, they walked it back immediately and it went away. Because it wouldn't take much to fix this. But what this is, and everybody's alluded to this is Windows Vistaification of Mac. Apple made an advert with John Hodgman and Justin Long about how Windows Vista went boop, 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 and put pop-ups everywhere. This is user hostile because you just continue. You don't read the prompts and you just allow everything. It's negative for security rather than positive.
I completely agree, and it is very Windows Vista-esque, which, like you say, Apple mocked Microsoft for. And now they've done everything they can do to go back that way.
Yeah. It's.
Did you know apparently one change they have made? So when you set up a new Mac and you import your previous Mac over, it remembers all the permissions you gave apps before. So that is one thing they have improved. That is a tick, but this just now feels like another backward step.
It's a pretty small tick for a much larger problem that's sort of underneath the surface. Apparently it'll even affect things like color picker apps. So if you're trying to use Photoshop or something like that to pick up what hue of green is that in the background, Photoshop will get a warning too.
Yeah, of course it would. It's stupid. It is very hostile, isn't it?
It's extremely user hostile. And I've heard a couple of people say this and write it on Mastodon. Users won't blame Apple for this. They'll blame the developers of the apps.
Yeah, why does your app keep doing this?
Yeah, your app keeps firing this thing up in my face. And apparently there's an API, a new screen sharing API that developers should be using to have this. But obviously there's no documentation for it, and there's been no pre-announcement that this is something they need to do. So every single app in the macOS Sequoia beta at the moment is firing up this prompt. It's awful. And I genuinely hope that next week we go, this wasn't a thing, or it's not going to be a thing because it's going to go away.
But I don't recall seeing this at WWDC, which is when they should be signposting to developers. Look, we're going to be adding this thing, but it's okay. You can play nice and do it like this, and it'll all be fine. We've got an API for you. So it's disappointing that's not happened.
It is. The other thing that's slightly more worrying, I mean, on one level, it doesn't bother me as much, but the more I think about it, the more it bothers me. So the second change they made was they're going to make it harder to run apps that don't follow security rules. And by that, apps that are notarized. So I've had this a couple of times because I use Homebrew to install apps on my Mac. Basically, what Apple want you to do is install all your apps via the App Store. Comes to a canonical place, you get Word on there, you get a couple of other bits and pieces, you get a new Mac, you click on it again, downloads, and it's all through the App Store, so it's been security verified by them and all the rest. They have a second tier of apps that are called notarized. We've talked about notarized apps before in terms of the iOS store, which I'll revisit in a minute. But what this means is you're an Apple developer, you spend your £100 a year to get Xcode and the developer versions of that, and that gives you the facility to send your binaries to Apple, who will sign them as being authentic from you. You register as a developer, your name gets added to the notarized app, and then macOS will just say something like, this app has been downloaded from the internet and you say, I'm happy with that. You click continue and off you go. You're off to the races. Notarized apps can run. The third tier of apps we currently have are unnotarized apps where you can right click on the bundle. You can say, I know what I'm doing. I'm a Mac user of the old school. I'm happy to continue. You can click notarize the bundle yourself effectively. You can authenticate the bundle yourself and the app will run happily, and end of story. What they're proposing is they'll get rid of that third step, or they'll make that third step much harder, where not only will you have to go into the bundle and say, I'm going to do this anyway, you then need to go into system preferences and allow it again a second time within that. So it's just, again, user hostile. Users that know what they're doing haven't got a problem with this at this point. Users that are scared by this would stop at the point that the alert came up to say, I'm not going to run this unless you do this. So this feels like an unnecessary step that they're adding in to make it even harder. I'll let you say something and I'll say why this upsets me so much.
No, I think I agree with you. I think I get it. We're trying to take some of the modern security things we've done on iOS and backport them to a 30-year-old macOS platform. And I think some of the idea, conceptually, if you just said that, why wouldn't we take the modern security and put it on the Mac? Yeah, that seems like a logical thing to do, doesn't it? But it's just some of the detail. Some of the implementation details just make you question it. Like, why is it not just in advanced mode? Just go and tick a box. I know what I'm doing. Let me put my password in. Let me reboot 5 times. And it's now in an advanced mode. I don't need all this cruft. And it will be like my Mac from 10 years ago or whatever. But they're just going too far one way and not enough the other way, I think. And that's the big problem here. In that I think they're trying to do the right thing and do modern security. Like many years ago, they did the thing, I'm going to get the name wrong, but like where your drive image is like a blend of 2 images, isn't it? You got the OS on one drive and you got the user bit on a different one. But they did it in such a good way, most people wouldn't even notice that that's how it's done. And that's a great idea, that you've really separated out the OS from the user's data. They've done really great innovations like that, which do improve security, like APFS. Much better for the world. Did it really well, but really thought it through how they were going to do it and convert everybody over to APFS, and nobody knew about it unless you're a tech. Why can't they do some of this with the security features? Leave it in noddy mode for most people by default, but you can opt out of it if you go and click the box and have a slightly more advanced mode, perhaps, or allow people to dismiss a dialogue and it not come back every 5 seconds. I think Apple are really missing some of the things why people like using a Mac. And like you, it would just drive people to use a Linux device. They're just going to end up frustrating their loyal user base.
This is it, isn't it? Your power user just wants to be able to go on. He wants the operating system. They want the operating system to get out of the way so they can get on and do their jobs. The operating system is a means to an end. It lets them edit their videos, write their Word documents, answer their email, whatever it is they need to do. It's not the end itself. And for those of us who have a preference, we've picked macOS over Windows because we like some of the affordances the operating system gives us. It works in a way that's logical to us, or we've got used to its quirks, or we preferred its security model, or we like the hardware, or whatever the reason that brought us here. We're here. Moves like this make me question why I'm here. That they're taking away things that has made me a very vociferous. I've converted a few people in my life to use Apple products. I've bought many of them. I buy them as part of my business decisions.
Hello
including
there.
Yourself. Yeah. And that's been a thing that I've been an advocate, an evangelist. Guy Kawasaki was the first official evangelist for Apple, if you want to go and read some Apple history. But I've been an evangelist for the platform. You've been an evangelist for the platform. 100%. You'll have people who work with you, who've bought phones as a consequence, laptops, family, all the things that I've done as part of this as well. That I've left a little Apple stamp around me where I've even said things to people like, I'll give you support with that if it's an Apple device. I'm not helping you on Windows because A, I don't know what I'm doing with it really anymore, and B, it's an inferior platform.
You and I are in the same place.
Yep. I hand on heart, not sure I can say that anymore. Unless things like this get walked back, it's a problem. Let me tell you my second problem with this. We have seen from Apple's behavior in the EU that notarizing apps is going to become a problem. Notarizing apps is being used as a hammer for the app marketplaces, which nobody ever anticipated this was going to be a thing. That we thought that Apple would just notarize apps for the other app marketplaces, and they would go through it. So we have seen AltStore in the EU being held up by Apple refusing to notarize the apps that are going to that. If they start taking the same sort of policy with notarized apps on the Mac, we're in a world of hurt.
I think this is the thing, because it's not just, look, we need to notarize your app for security reasons, and we've already done this in other places, so this is a no-brainer. You should do this for the Mac, and it makes sense. And on the face of it, it does make sense. But because we've seen them use it as a way to force people to bend to their will, they've now ruined the whole concept of notarization, because it's now become a gatekeeping tactic for Apple to use against a developer. So I think if they hadn't done that, and then this would make slightly more sense, that yep, we're going to notarize your apps and it's completely provided by Apple. We just try and do the right thing for the platform. Big tick, done. But you've got to pay for it. You've got Apple potentially holding something over you if you're not doing exactly what they want. And that is the problem. They are just becoming a bigger gatekeeper, and they're taking their platform that they're not a gatekeeper of at the moment, but they've turned themselves into a gatekeeper of it.
Yeah. And this is a solved problem in the open source world. And when you're releasing binaries to install software, as a developer, you can create a hash for that. It's normally an SHA, it's a SHA code for that the developer will say, I have written this app, here is the code for it. And then you can test against that using the same tools they signed it off with to make sure the binary is the same and hasn't been tampered with. It's effectively notarization from that point of view. This is a solved problem. All right, geeky technical people like me and you might do that more often than not. We'll trust the developer, we'll install it, and off we'll go. We'll go from the reviews, and we hope that it hasn't been poisoned from something or other. But that's always been the case for software. Always been the case for software. Going back to the first DOS programs I installed back in the day, you had to trust what you got from the game provider, that you bought on the disk, that you bought on the floppy, that you ran on the tape for your Commodore 64. I remember an early Amiga cover disc coming with a virus on it from a magazine. I think it was called Stampede. And the magazine was... They distributed a virus with the software on the magazine. Killed the magazine. But that's the consequence of that. You kill the magazine. If a developer starts pushing malware or something, the developer will fall. It's not on the platform vendor to feel that they've got such ownership of the platform so they can claim the 30%, that they've got to take this level of control. I mostly know what I'm doing on a Mac. You mostly know what you're doing on a Mac. Trust us.
Yeah, and like I say, even if that is an elevated option, then that's fine. If you want to protect the majority of your user base, crack on. But equally, give an option for those pro users that know what they're doing. I find the whole thing really bizarre, the whole stance on it. They keep saying the Mac's the pro tool, and all our programmers use it, loads of creatives use it, and yet they keep walking it back a little bit. But again, it's death by a thousand cuts, because it's just one little thing each year. Something comes out to hamstring you.
It totally is. And you think about what are the unintended consequences and stuff like that. It could be you control your Mac using a piece of software on your iPad where you remote into it. What if the alert goes off and you're not allowed to remote into your Mac, and your Mac's in an inaccessible location and you can't do anything?
As I often do with our podcast, after we've recorded, I go to my house, I remote into it, and I upload the files once they've been re-encoded. So, and I love that functionality. I don't want that to go away. I'd love to be able to do that with my iPad. Can I remote onto my iPad? Sadly not.
Yeah. If you've got if you're Mac Collab, are they called Mac Colo, who've got thousands of Mac Minis sitting in shelves as servers, presumably you use the same sort of tool to manage that. If you're helping, this doesn't happen with FaceTime, mind. If you're doing FaceTime screen sharing, you can get away with it. But if you use VNC or one of those other softwares to manage your computer, and one of these alerts pops up on the server that you're connecting to, you're probably screwed and you need to walk over to it. It's just on every level, from being able to pick colors to share your screen in your Teams meeting to stuff like this. On every level, it's bad. And I hope, come next week, you and I can say, oh yeah, that went away.
I'm with you on this. I'm hoping Apple's reading the room, because like with the last beta, they've made changes to photos and rolled back some changes because of testing and actual feedback from people running the betas, which is great. That's what you want to see and hear, isn't it? Yep, we've listened. We're not going to go with it. We've rolled it back. But yeah, I'm not sure they're going to do it. That's, you know what I mean? I'm just not sure.
Yeah, the momentum for Apple with things like the adverts going wrong, the software choices, what they're doing with the EU, all those kinds of things. It really bothers me, and it bothers me increasingly every week. And as a consequence, unsurprisingly, we had a whole show where I talked about building up Linux servers and stuff like that. I look more and more towards that side of the fence for my software, and potentially can I do my daily computing on it? And you've challenged me before about could I do a month of Linux and what would that look like? And I genuinely am considering it now.
A month of Linux and Android in a Wanna, that would be interesting.
It's a lot to take on. For
it is a
both,
lot
isn't
of
it?
muscle memory after over 20 years to change.
It's an awful lot to change. The podcast, for example, even just something as simple as that. I know I'd record my side of it, but there aren't tools like Audio Hijack Pro, as far as I'm aware, on Linux. I'm sure I could cobble something together. There is the most powerful broadcasting platform for screen recording and sharing, and called OBS, which is it's a Unix first tool. But I need to get my head around that. I've got to learn something new. That requires cognitive effort for me to go off and do that. And that's not bad. I don't mind learning new things. Might stave off the debenture for another couple of years. But you know what I mean? It's a lot to consider.
Yeah, it's not just browsing the web, reading your email. It's like you say, how do you record and edit a podcast, which I hadn't really appreciated, I guess, because obviously you do the lion's share of that, and I have no idea where to start on Linux with any of it. I'm not sure I know where to start on Mac with most of it, to be fair.
Well, I think we'll get there in the end. And let's face it, people record podcasts on iPads, they record them on phones, they can do all sorts of things. Nothing is impossible. But at some point, if the 1,000 cuts continue, it's going to become one cut too many. And then I genuinely rue the day where I might need to get rid of this beautiful piece of hardware that I record this podcast on, with its amazing battery and fantastic performance and everything, and go back to some hot air blowing in my lap, Wintel, but Unix piece of software running on commodity hardware, which, let's face it, will probably cost me half the money anyway, and all this, it's pros and cons, isn't it?
100%. I managed to pick up an old laptop for my son from somebody, and it's an i7 big gaming computer, and it's got very loud noise fans on it. It weighs a ton, and there I am with my lovely MacBook Pro. Whilst it's relatively chunky, is nothing, it does not make the fans that makes, isn't as loud, isn't as heavy. Apple do make the best hardware, 100%.
They absolutely do. But, the flip side of that are companies like Framework, who will make a laptop where it's entirely user replaceable. You don't want the USB-C port on this, you want an Ethernet instead. You just pop it off, plug a new one in, and off you go. They've released an updated resolution screen, so when it came out at a 2880 by whatever screen, you can now, all the laptops they've made going back the last 4 years, you can pop the screen off that and you can put a higher resolution screen on instead, for a cost of about £300, instead of a cost of another £1,300 for your laptop. That's a commitment to recycling that Apple I don't think has ever had.
No, they haven't. They should be getting there, but it's curious to see what their messaging is going to be with new products as time goes on. But when they brought out like the new iPads, they didn't really touch upon sustainability. Whereas when they brought out the recent Apple Watches and bands, they were really banging the sustainability drum.
It's gone a bit quiet on that front though, hasn't it?
Yeah, massively, which is a little concerning.
Yeah, I don't think the whole fine woven thing, which went very quiet, the whole fine woven scandal, they just stopped talking about it. But that was such a big release for them last year, and nothing.
But isn't that Apple's way? Let's just stop talking about it and it will go away.
Some of these things aren't going to go away though, and I suppose that's the thought we want to finish with towards the end here, is that I worry about the momentum building against them, or they think they're bringing a lot of people with them and they might not be. I don't know.
No, I think I agree with you. I think that is the thing, isn't it? They keep making all these changes, some good. They've done some great stuff in Mac OS, but equally, every now and again, they take a step back or step in the wrong direction, or a very misguided step. And I think there's enough feedback publicly available for them, but they just don't seem to be listening to it, and it's frustrating. Or they don't even comment on it, which is more annoying. Yep, we've heard you, but actually this is why we're doing this. And we've seen an increase in X, Y, and Z, but you just don't get that context around it, which is frustrating.
Absolutely. If they'd made these changes and said, what we've seen is 30% of Macs are affected by some horrendous, bug or a virus or a malware attack that people are having all their images stolen, and because they'd never admit that level of security problem anyway. But if they give a justification for why, rather than just inflicting it on people, it would be a different story.
Completely agree.
I will finish this section by just saying Jason Snell has written a very good article about his thoughts on this, which unsurprisingly mirror a lot of the things that Chris and I have said over the last couple of minutes or so, and it's well worth a read. It's not very long, but very thoughtful, and even John Gruber has come down on the side of this is a step too far, Apple, so good grief, even he can't get that Kool-Aid down.
No, it is interesting to see his view of the world, because normally he's a very pro-Apple person.
Very pro-Apple. Shall we do an app of the week?
Yes, let's do an app of the week. What have we got?
It's very simple this week. It's just a very fast code editor. So if you're the kind of person who likes to write even, get my teeth in as they say, a bit of HTML or some Python or some Markdown or something like that, and you want something fast and efficient to do it, there's a very British named app called Z. Z.dev if you want to find it in the show notes, and it's by the guys that wrote the Atom text editor, which was the original text editor for GitHub back in the day before Microsoft bought that and shut everything down, and now everything's Visual Studio. I kind of push back against Visual Studio quite a lot because it is so ubiquitous, so I'm quite happy to try different things. Z has got my attention at the moment. I'm still sort of checking it out. If you do sign in at GitHub, it brings in a lot of the sort of Copilot and LLM-based stuff to it too, if you want to check that out. It's very fast, it's cross-platform, it's Mac, Linux, and Windows, and I'm just sort of kicking the tires on it.
It's quite impressive. It's Mac, Windows, and Linux, isn't it? And it looks very nice, very polished, I would say.
It's good. Good theming built into it as well. Doesn't have all sort of libraries and things that Visual Studio Code has, but that's not a surprise. That's a very mature product at this point. If you want to get your Jupyter notebooks or something up and running in Visual Studio, you can do that. But there seems to be more and more plugins for Z all the time, so one to keep an eye on, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. And like I say, it just looks very crisp how they've made it. And yeah, I like it. I like the look of it.
Good stuff. Thing of the week.
Thing of the week for me. So I've just ordered a book around retro gaming with the Raspberry Pi. My son gets the Raspberry Pi magazine. This book was in there, advertised. I thought, actually, do you know what? That looks quite fun. I wouldn't mind to have a go at that. We've got some Raspberry Pis. I'd like to do some coding. I have no idea how some of these games are made. I'd love to just to write Pong. How is all that done? So I've ordered that, and something for me and my boy, I think maybe to do a little project with a bit of Python over the summer, hopefully. Good
plan. I like it. You like your little Pi summer projects, don't you?
Yeah, I feel like I should do more with it because it's quite accessible. We've got a few of them. Some of the stuff I was reading about in my son's magazine, they were on about doing a Winamp interface. I thought, that'd be great. I'd love to do that. Touchscreen Winamp interface. So it looks like Winamp plays your MP3s. And I was like, I haven't got any MP3s. That's a pain. Well, everything's Apple Music in my world. So I don't think I've really got any MP3s. I know. Shock horror. So I don't know what I would do in that scenario. But I'd love to go and play with something like that because it looked super interesting to me.
I don't have new MP3s, but when I did my big rip of all my CDs back in the day, I've still got all of them on my NAS.
Oh, I've lost them to the sands of time at some point.
You've got to sort out your storage, mate.
Yeah, I know. I'm a bad person. What can I say?
I mean, I'm a digital pack rat. I keep all that kind of stuff. Why throw it away? It's just bits and bytes. Hard drives get bigger. Keep it.
In hindsight, you're quite correct. I probably should have done that. C'est la vie, but I just fancied doing something, and I thought this might give me a bit of impetus to do it, and hopefully some code examples to get me up and running.
Fair play, good choice, quite like it. I would throw in one recommendation for if you are an Apple News subscriber, is Linux Format Magazine is available on there, and they have programming tutorials at the end of that magazine that are in Python or Rust or C++, and they'll take you from beginner to not advanced, but they'll give you sort of flavour for all the languages, so it might be worth a flick through that too.
I must confess I quite like that magazine, and now I've got the 11-inch iPad. I actually find myself reading a lot more and just taking the iPad off. That I really want to get the 13-inch one because it is a bit big. You know, the screen is bigger, but I just know I wouldn't rip it off the cover as much and actually hold it like a magazine. The 11-inch one is perfect for that.
Very good. You've just reminded me that I've got an app of the week next week, which is an iPad app.
Ooh, interesting. I didn't know you knew what an iPad was.
It does just sit there with the battery gradually decreasing on it, but I have got one thing.
Fair enough. I think that's the show. Shall we call that the end of the show? Look, if anybody would like to get in contact, Rod is at g5maniac@mastodon.scot. I'm at _CGP@mastodon.social. You can watch on YouTube if you go to wakefromsleep.com and click on the YouTube link, or you can drop us an email, wakefromsleep@protonmail.com.
Talk to you next week, Chris.
Cheers, Rod.